right, welcome guys to our first talk show, our local talk show. We are 1010 Baltimore. I'm Bruce Jackson. I'll be the host of the show. I have two special guests here today. I have to my immediate right, Mr. William Buie, attorney at law. And further right, I have Dr. Reginald Thomas, the pastor of the Greater Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church. They're here to enlighten us on some things that would help us build our community. 1010 Baltimore's goal is to help change the narrative of Baltimore. I believe that there's a lot of negative things that's aired on the media about our city, but there's a lot of positive things that go on here. And we just want to talk about some of the issues that face our city and talk about how we can help rectify some of those things to move forward to help better our city. So again, guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is our first one, so it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, yes sir, yes sir. You guys are both sharp, by the way, man. I mean,
We knew you were going to be sharp.
All right, great. So I'll go ahead and get started with our first question here. You guys both being vital elements in our city. William Buie, you being an attorney, Dr. Thomas, you being a pastor, some would say church and state, you know. So having both of you guys here, you both have vital pieces that you bring to the community. William Buie being an attorney, you deal with people who deal with legal issues, and Dr. Thomas being a pastor, you sometimes dealing with people in the community having all kinds of issues, and they come to you for some type of counsel. So my question to you guys is, and Buie, you can ask this first, is what do you feel are some of the issues that's plaguing our city today?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the whole violence problem. And with over 300 plus deaths last year, I mean, it's the violence. That's only the fatalities where people die. That's not counting where people are actually not killed as a result of the shooting.
Right.
So I think somehow or another we have to bring really the civility amongst each other.
Gotcha.
While the focus has been on, and to the right extent, what the police are doing to us, we also have to have a focus on what we're doing to each other.
Right.
And somehow or another that slipped away. And I don't think that's a uniquely Baltimore problem. I think that's a problem in the African American community from city to city across the United States.
Right.
So the first thing we need to do is figure out how can we really stop the violence so we can at least have a conversation about how we can solve the rest of the problems.
Great.
Right.
Dr. Thomas, what would you say are some of the issues that's plaguing our city today?
So I agree with Buie that violence is a major concern, a major issue. I was just thinking that when you have a patient who is sick, whether it is a physical illness, a psychological illness, that often before a physician or a psychologist or psychiatrist can actually begin to work on curing the problem, they first have to stabilize the patient. And I think that that as Wood was talking about addressing the issues of violence is really a part of us stabilizing things so that we can be at a place of civility and address some of the other systemic concerns. For me, I think that one of the major issues that almost like a thread runs through all the other concerns in our city has to do with unemployment and underemployment.
Wow.
I think that unemployment and underemployment play a major role in the crime and violence issue. I don't think that they're the only contributing factors, unemployment and underemployment, but I do think they play a major role. I was just thinking the other day when I look at Baltimore and the history of Baltimore. I grew up in the city, and when I think about older men that I grew up admiring and looking up to, and where most of them were employed, those companies are no longer around. When you think about, that's right, a Baltimore without Bethlehem Steel, without Sparrows Point, without Continental Can, without all of these other manufacturing industries, Park Sausage is gone, GM is gone, all of those places are gone. And when I think about how the majority of the men in the generation previous to me, the baby boomers, and even the others, they were employed in those companies. Those companies are now gone, which means those jobs are gone. And those persons, their sons and their daughters don't have those places as places of employment anymore. And so as my sister told me, Reggie, never underestimate another person's need for money. that people will do anything in some instances for money. And I think that part of our crime problem, violence problem, is also connected to unemployment and underemployment.
Wow.
Folks don't have any places to work.
Wow. I agree with both of
I
you.
agree with that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And that's just some of the problems, you know. And those are probably the major issues that our city is facing right now. And my next question to follow up with that becomes, why do you think these problems really exist?
And you know, at the core level, unfortunately, I really think they exist because African Americans have not somehow gotten out of a slave mentality. And it's embarrassing to say in 2016 that somebody would actually say, you know, hey, look, this is something that happened to a group of people hundreds of years ago that's still having an effect. But I do think it's still having an effect. We as African Americans, we're in the United States of America, but we don't act like we're in the United States of America.
Right.
We don't act like this is the land of opportunity, you know, a land of infinite possibilities. We seem to constrain ourselves to some extent, even despite the fact, well, I agree, because my dad worked at Bethlehem Steel. My father's father worked at Bethlehem Steel. I'm really the first person in my family that really did not work at didn't work at the Point.
Wow.
So all I heard was stories about my dad and his father and the other men from the neighborhood, how they would get in the car, and you know, I guess they didn't call it carpooling back then. I don't know what they called it then,
Right.
but they would go out and go to the Point to work.
Right.
So, you know, our mentality really has to change, which is basically an inferiority complex. Somehow or another, that has to change. The African American community is basically built around a paradigm where not being African American is more favored. That's the secret of the African American community.
Right.
So many of the people, and there's nothing wrong with it, but many of the people that we look at in terms of the traditional African American leaders were very fair complected people. I'm trying to figure out a way to be politically correct.
Shade prejudice.
You know, but yeah, it's really, and the way everything, the way we have our value system. So how can we be unique as we are unique and still make it with respect to mainstream society? I think that's the real question. You can still be you and make it in America. Maybe that's what is the special thing about you that gives you the advantage when you go into the workplace. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with assimilating. You know, it's like I'm a lawyer. You have to have a couple of gray suits and gray ties because that's part of the system. Well, there's nothing wrong with being yourself. So I think when you take a look at, and I've recently done an analysis of Willie Lynch, and I don't know if everybody knows who Willie Lynch is, but Willie Lynch was the person who came up with the strategy to oppress African Americans, to turn them into slaves. And that whole strategy of kind of divide and conquer really still exists nowadays, whether it be based upon age, based upon complexion, based upon within our own community, income level. You know, because there's, supposedly there's the bourgeoisie, black people. We don't get along with the round the way, black people. You know, so that all of these things that have a tendency to divide us that we really don't talk about. You know, and I think that's part of the problem because we don't communicate. The thing that I found most distressing is, because I do criminal defense, part of the thing that I found distressing is that many of the times, I think with the African American males, we're actually babying them to the point where, you know, they do something really stupid we can't get them out of, and then they're in the Department of Corrections. And it's not only me, but it's pastor coming over to see them too. We all involved in the transaction, trying to save Johnny, when the reality is Johnny probably should have been saved a long time ago with a better value system.
Right. Gotcha. Dr. Thomas, what would you say is the reason why our city is plagued the way it is?
I think it's in large part because of systemic and structural racism as it relates at least to black folks. It's interesting. I was listening to Buie and I was remembering a fellow colleague who finished his doctorate around the same time I was involved, and so I was told about his dissertation. In fact, I had the opportunity to read it. And he did his dissertation on what's called post-traumatic slave syndrome, where he was studying the ongoing effects of the legacy of slavery. The interesting thing, the counterintuitive thing, almost the thing that doesn't make sense, is his findings did not line up with what he anticipated finding. So he thought he was going to overwhelmingly find support from the African Americans that he surveyed to suggest that yes, they overwhelmingly feel like the African American community, including them, is still plagued by post-traumatic slave syndrome. Well, the persons that he polled, in essence, said, no, I don't think it affects me. By and large, they said, oh no, I'm not affected. Here was the crazy thing though. They said, oh yeah, everybody else is. Oh yeah, all the other black folk are, just not me.
Right.
And so they really had a blind spot to how they themselves were affected by it, but when they looked at the impact on our community, they said, what's everybody else? And so when you look at the socioeconomic, the demographics of people polled, so many of them were well educated, their pedigree, so they had, a little bougie, had a little money, and so they couldn't see how it impacted them or their family, because they felt like they were still able to rise. Now, if you start talking about obstacles and how hard it was and all the hindrances, they were still not connected to the legacy of slavery. And I think that in reality, we look at, like we said, little Johnny, who's, he's incarcerated, and maybe he's 18 or close to it, and we start to look at, wow, this didn't just start. You start looking at all the things that built up to it in the African American community. Now, sadly to say, more than 70% of children in the African American community are growing up in a household where there is no father present or active. And so when you start to then look at the school to prison pipeline, when you look at the volume of kids in foster care, when you start to look at all the other veins, I would say, or tentacles, a lot of this goes right back to rearing and how we're raised, certainly. But when you look at the deficits, who's not there, what's not there, what resources are not there, and then the whole psychology of our people, not just in our generation, but when you look at really the legacy of slavery on and its impact on the really the psyche of our people, that no doubt, when you look at the written work of our folks, I talked about this a little bit on Sunday, that we tend not to be a people who writes a whole lot in terms of our disciplines. I'm not sure about law, but I know in terms of theology and all of its disciplines, that a lot of our black scholars, we don't write that much, because so often we're not nurtured to think that we have something to say worth reading, whereas our Caucasian counterparts assume and presume that people want to read what they have to say, and so we then have to work on that.
That's a lost art, though. The whole, like you're saying, the whole idea of writing and the whole idea of reading is something that's lost.
Right.
And it's kind of like one of those hallmarks of creating failure. Not having it, because it's not cool for Johnny to go to school,
right,
and want to be a great student,
right,
and be a great writer or reader in class. I mean, I grew up in Baltimore City, and went to a good school, but really wasn't. And I went to City College.
I went to college.
I feel like.
Yeah, that's a major rivalry.
I'm sorry.
So that's
you go to college when you get to heaven. I'm sorry.
So
that's pretty good.
That kind of segues us into the next question, and that becomes, how do we surpass the issues to get to the resolution of the problem that we're facing? So you both identified some major issues, some major challenges that our city face, and you touched on a lot of reasons as to why we face these issues, but then the question becomes, in trying to build our community. In the promo video, I had a chance to talk about some of the things, like when I grew up. I grew up in Baltimore City, and I grew up during a time where the neighbors knew my name. The neighbors would correct me. The neighbors knew my parents. So the neighbors could pull me up and let me know, hey, look, if you don't stop, I'm gonna go get your father.
Right.
If you don't stop, I'm gonna go get your mother. How do we get back to that type of place? How do we get back to the place where we can catch little Johnny before he gets incarcerated? Like, how do we start to change the dynamic of where we are with what we have, with the limited resources that we have, without having the Bethlehem Steel, without having the plants and the work and everything else in place that we used to have? How do we get back into a point where we can rebuild and motivate our city?
I think Pastor alluded to it, and I think it's a big part of, you have to have mentorship. And I think this is kind of, to me, in a sense, it's a controversial topic because I really think you need to have male mentorship. And that's something that's been ignored. I think a mother can do a pretty good job by herself. But I think sometimes you can have a diamond, and a diamond can be a big, pretty diamond, but sometimes you need certain things to polish that diamond. Right. And I think that's where the male influence comes in. Not that it's not a beautiful diamond if it's not polished, but it becomes a lot better diamond. You know what I mean? A lot more valuable diamond. The issue is, we're going to have to start taking responsibility. African American males are going to have to start taking responsibility. I think it starts in your own house first. Right. Because I don't think you can go out here and mentor somebody else's child when your children are running wild on the street. Because I think sometimes, you kind of have to look at this like, the male is almost a figurehead. I'm at work all the time, but everybody knows when I come home and something's wrong, they gonna tell daddy. Right. Daddy gonna do something about it. Right. You see what I'm saying? So I think it starts in your own home, trying to take care of your children. Doesn't mean to me that you necessarily even have to be with the mother of that child, married to her, which would, to me, be preferential. We run around, we have babies about people, right. But we won't marry. Right. Ain't that something? Right. We'll lay down with you. Yeah. You know what I mean? We had a baby. Right. But somehow or another is we want to let this institution, this basic foundation institution of marriage, escape us. So I think first you start with your own house, and I think you have a foundation where you're taking care of your own children. If they don't live with you, make sure you go pick them up as often as possible. If they don't live with you, try to have the most civil relationship that you could possibly have with the mother of your child or children. Don't call out a name. Don't treat it crazy. Treat it like the mother of your children. And then I think beyond that, there has to be a system where you go to what I would describe as the extended family, where the extended family would have uncles, great uncles, grandfathers, whoever they can get to come in and to be able to provide some mentorship to that young male. Okay? Now beyond that, there has to be mentorship that may not come in the size, shape, and form that we expected it to come in. Meaning that, for example, my most influential mentor is not African American. He passed away. He was Jewish. He's from Israel. That's not who I thought was going to come be my mentor. Right. That's not the way I thought it was going to go down. But quickly I started to see that, look, this is what's happening. You can accept it or reject it. Right. I looked at it from the standpoint where, hey, I want to take all the help that's being given to me. So while I had a mentor in the law that was Warren Brown, my general business mentor was this man from Israel who loved me like I was his son. So, and that started to teach me something, meaning that you can develop a strong relationship with someone who does not have a blood bond with you. Right. And you can mentor that person. Because, I hate to say this, but in the Jewish community, that's the way it works. You're not going to have some Jewish kid grow up that's not going to have a mentor, right, who's not going to see the value of men in their community come together, support one another, and support the young people. So whatever way we could work the mentorship through, whatever structure, the unfortunate part may be because in our community, we have so few mentors, we may have to, maybe one mentor may have 5 mentees. But whatever way it can get accomplished, that's the way it can get accomplished. Because to think that you're going to grow up in the hood with Johnny, with no mentor, and things are supposed to be all right, and you're not going to wake up one day and get that call that Johnny done got caught at Green Mountain North with a handgun. Right. You're crazy. That's what's going to happen. Because if you don't give Johnny a mentor, the street going to give Johnny a mentor. And the street's mentor is not going to lead Johnny to a very good place. So I think the whole idea of mentorship is the key to success. I think facilitating any programs, and I'm going to be honest, I take it one step further. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. That's why I got disappointed with the Million Man March. If anything should have came out of Million Man March, I'm not saying rebuild the world. I'm just saying set up, get lists together. You know, and I know the first Million Man March was 95. I mean, computers were prevalent, but certainly not as prevalent as now. But in the modern era, why not get together some type of list server where people can sign up to be mentors with the mentees? What I've been doing is mentoring people after they've been convicted of the crime.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And a lot of these people have been convicted for violent offenses. So violent that you wouldn't know that they just as soft as a teddy bear. The problem is nobody loved them. That's what's wrong. Johnny got charged with attempt murder. You said Johnny there and talked to him like halfway decent. Johnny turned out to be a halfway decent person. Now the only thing Johnny needs is a mentor to point him in the right direction so he can get a job opportunity. Johnny needs to be told that he can start a business, that he can become a pastor, that he can start a TV show, that he can be a lawyer. He needs that relationship with people that are actually doing it, so in his mind, he can go out and do it. But what we're doing is we're not doing it. Somehow I know that the African American male, I believe because of the Willie Lynch syndrome, basically where there's a complete disrespect for the African American male. You can't conquer people without destroying the male. That's continued. That's why there's the disrespect. People get in your face, say exactly what they want to say. You know what I mean? And whether it be through male-female relationships or whatever kind of relationships. It's just disrespect that we have for each other. We have to start, like tonight. It was still a pleasure meeting Pastor. Very respectful guy. Boom. I never mentioned before, but we get it right off.
Right.
But we have the same mind and we want to work it out. That's what we have to do. But the mentorship, I don't know if this program can be a catalyst for it. It's embarrassing. They want to lock up everybody. They'll never tell you about any mentorship program.
Right.
They want to lock everybody up. You know what I mean? Because some of the things people could learn how to interact with other people a lot better. And I think life would be better for us in our community and our interactions with people in Maine.
I agree. You know, Naeem Akbar wrote a book where he, in essence, deals with visions of manhood, and part of his presupposition, and I agree, is that you really need a vision of what you hope to become, and what Boyce saw in terms of mentoring. Growing up in East Baltimore, you know, without a father in the home, raised by a single mother, I was always looking to other men in the community and in my family for a vision of what I would, you know, want to see myself doing and being. So it was almost this idea that if I can see it, you know, I can be it. So if I can see someone who's doing positive things, and I had to learn that a good man is not a perfect man. I had to learn that a good role model may have some areas in his life where, you know, he may not necessarily be walking in victory in that area. So I had to learn that the hard way, because I would, you know, kind of visually, you know, latch into it. I said, well, you know, it looks like he's got a good career. I'm gonna watch him, and then I find out, you know, you got this other thing going on that maybe, you know, doesn't line up with his public persona. But I had to learn, hey, you know what? You can't expect perfection from every mentor, whether it's a formal or informal mentor relationship. And so when I learned that, I was able to get some great visions of some guys who, for me, showed me sometimes not always how to succeed, but how to get back up again after failure. And so the idea is really exposure. So for you, the gentleman who wasn't African American, but sounds like he exposed you to some things business-wise that helped to show you a picture of what could become possible. And I think that so many of us, you know, back in the day, before the day that you spoke of, Bruce, where before that day when you had most of our professionals, whether it was the attorneys, the council persons, you still have some of that, but your physicians, your pastors, we all lived in the same community because our brothers and sisters of a much lighter hue wouldn't let us move into those areas because of community covenants. And so we all lived in the same areas. We went to church together. We shopped in the same places, all that kind of good stuff. And so we got to got to see persons who had reached certain levels, once we were able to get access to more. And I'm not mad about anybody taking advantage of opportunities, but I think now, though, we need to be more intentional about allowing other people to see us. I had to learn from a youth pastor. As a pastor, I heard a youth pastor say, he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, Pastor Thomas, you have a major opportunity from the pulpit to show young people what it looks like to be a man who's staying with his wife, raising his children. Right. I said, man, say more. He said, you gotta say more and talk more about what you do with your family. Right. You're really giving a picture and a vision of what's possible. And I took him up on it and said, wow, and it was amazing to me, some of the feedback I got back from persons who were wondering, so what's that look like? What's it look like, when you hang out with your family? No major agenda, but what's that look like? Mm-hmm. And so giving them a picture and an image, as I would say, a vision of manhood. My mother, I think, did a phenomenal job raising an African American son off Green Mountain on 23rd Street. And I know what Green Mountain North looks like. I had Green Mountain Recreation Center to play basketball. I played BMBL basketball, Project Survival basketball. I did all that at Green Mountain Rec, sometime down at Cecil. And my mother did a great job, but I can really thank and praise God for the visions of manhood that I saw. Many of them, again, not perfect, flawed, but at the same time, able to show a young man, what it's like to be a man, to raise his family, to stay there, right. To stick it out, all that good stuff. So I think mentoring is a major component. I think we have to start where we are. We do have to start in our homes. I get frustrated sometimes because I can think macro as well as micro, and I'll think macro with some stuff and get frustrated at the sheer size of what's needed. Only to have to come back and say, well, you know what? Maybe you can't change the world, in a matter of months and years, but you can start right where you are, so that give some folks a vision of what can be. I think that would be helpful.
That's great. I'm glad you both gave the answers that you gave, because in preparation for this show, we had several planning meetings, and in those planning meetings, we began to discuss some things about how we, as 1010 Baltimore, can help with building or rebuilding our city or our community. And when you look at a city, it's filled with people. And when you have people, you have relationships. And I believe that we've lost relationships due to a lot of different things, be it social media, be it video games, be it so many different things. We've lost a lot of our communication. There's not a lot of family dinners where people sit down and talk. There's family dinners where you're on your phones, whole family on their phone, and we don't have conversations. I can remember stories that my parents told me as a child, because stories stick with you, but there's no storytelling going on now with between the parent and the child, because they're preoccupied with technology. There's so many things that distract us. So now when you look at relationship from the standpoint of outside the home, you can't walk up to little Johnny and tell him to put the gun down, and you don't even know who he is. You haven't even spoke to him and say hello, because now he's going to turn the gun on you and say you can get it too. So I believe that following up and feedback what you guys said, mentorship is very important, because all it takes is to have a relationship with someone to mentor. And I believe that a lot of men have tried to mentor and have gotten frustrated because they did not know it was as simple as building a relationship with a person, which means simply saying hello, how are you doing? How was your week? How was school? How was work? All those things are communication that you have when you have a relationship with someone. So if you have the relationship, if I speak to little Johnny when I go to the corner store, if I speak to little Johnny when I see him walking up the street, then when I see little Johnny with the gun, I say, hey, little Johnny, what are you doing? And out of his respect, out of relationship, he said, you know what? Mr. Bruce, you're right. Dr. Thomas, you're right. Mr. Buie, you're right. I'm going to put the gun down. Because of the relationship that was built, but I feel like we sometimes approach mentorship without training, without knowledge, without education, and therefore it causes the rebuttal. It causes them to say, you know what, you don't know me. You don't know me like that. You don't know my struggle. You don't know what I've been through. It causes that resistance because we don't have the relationship. And that was one of the key things we talked about in planning this talk show. You guys hit it on the nail, is that I believe that we need relationship, which is mentorship. You know, somebody that young people feel like they can go to when someone disrespects them. Because little Johnny may feel like, well, I'm a man, and if a man disrespects me, I gotta handle it, or else people are gonna think I'm a punk. Where little Johnny may need to come to a Dr. Thomas or Mr. Buie and say, hey, look, this dude disrespected me. How should I handle it? Because I'm thinking about handling it this way, but I need somebody to talk to me rationally, you know, and they can get a transparent answer from a pastor or a lawyer that can say, you know what, I was disrespected too. I remember when I was in high school and I dealt with this situation. Here's how I dealt with it. Here's the outcome. You know, they need that. They need that story, that transparency to say, you know what, you're right. I don't have to handle it like this. Because now one fight nowadays turn into multiple fights. Because if you win one fight, now you got to fight the big brother
It turns into gunplay.
and the father.
It
And then
turns into gunplay.
Exactly.
It ends with a gunfight.
Right. And so one fight never ends.
Right.
It keeps going and going and going. A guy gets locked up, little Johnny gets locked up. Guess what? He get out of jail, he wants revenge. You know? And it comes from a lack of having people who can step up and have relationships and say, you know what, all right, you out of jail now. What's your plan? What are you gonna do? Let me help you.
You know, there's a lot being talked about now, well, I should say being written about, concerning emotional intelligence, social intelligence, even relational intelligence. Because I think we're seeing the erosion of social skills. People don't know. We learn by having to deal with each other. We learn the art of de-escalation. That you can't allow everything to go from a 2 to a 10.
Right.
You know, that there's some things you gotta learn how to de-escalate. We learn it as a social skill, having to deal with one another. I do think, and I'm on social media, I'm a proponent of social media, but I do think it contributes in many ways to the erosion of those social skills because persons try to do everything in the virtual world and don't know how to connect relationally in the real world.
Wow.
And so in the real world, there's a lot of research out there now about how impolite we're becoming as a society because of the devices we're wired to. You know, you used to be courteous enough that if you walked through a door and you saw someone else come behind you, you held the door for them.
Right.
Not if you wired though.
Right.
If you wired, you open the door and you letting it shut behind you because you're not paying as much attention. Also, we're wired, we want everything on demand.
Right.
Well, if you're face to face, patience
Right.
has to be called for. So often, but we're so discourteous and impolite now, which means that, you know, we're on edge more, things aren't happening fast enough in real time compared to virtual time. And so there's a lot being written about now in terms of the erosion of social skills, the erosion of social intelligence, so that in many ways, in mentoring and face-to-face relationships, we're really helping people to develop some more social skills. The higher you go, it's no longer typically about your specific technical skill set. It becomes more about your social skills.
Right.
So boy, now we come in, we talk, we stand and talk. I can tell if he had to sit in the boardroom, if he had to sit with somebody who just got charged with attempted, or sit in the boardroom with some high-profile millionaires, billionaires, his social skills are gonna kick in.
Right.
You know, we've had to develop that. But if you have some persons who are impatient, maybe even a little bit apprehensive about how they can relate to other people, you're gonna have a much greater chance of things escalating.
That's great. And sorry to cut you off. I know you got a lot to say. We're actually out of time. I got the cue. So I wish, and we're gonna do this again. We're gonna do this. This is the first talk show.
Wonderful.
And we try to limit it to 40 minutes because we have 45 minutes total.
Did we talk too long?
Yeah, we did. So we did. I think we're into about 40 minutes.
Okay.
So now we're cutting into the time of the performer. We have a performer coming on after us, and I wanted to give him 5 minutes to really do his piece. But I thank you both for coming out.
Thank you. It was
Thanks for
excellent.
having
It was a pleasure.
I feel like we've discussed a lot, accomplished a lot, and we're going to be starting this talk show every Monday starting in February.
Okay.
So every Monday, we're gonna keep the same topic, building the community within the community. On February the 1st, which is the first talk show Monday, we have 2 activists that's coming.
Wow.
That were very involved in the Freddie Gray case and situation in the Sandtown neighborhood. We're gonna be talking to them on the 1st, and I believe we have another activist that 8th, that following Monday. And interestingly, on the 3rd Monday, we have young people that we're gonna talk to, because we wanna hear what they have to say, what they feel are some of the issues that's plaguing the community, and how they feel they need help in this day and age from us baby boomers. You know, you could baby boom, I'm still a millennial, all right?
I'm a Generation X.
Okay, Generation X. Yeah, but again, guys, I thank you for your time. We're gonna have Contradiction, who is a spoken word. He's an artist altogether. I'm not even gonna limit him or put him in a bottle and say he's a spoken word artist, but he's an artist in general. And I'm gonna have him come. We can exit the stage, he can come, do his piece. I thank everybody for coming. I'll come back with final words once Contradiction is done.
You can keep your white Jesus, your preachers, your priestess, your Christmas, your Easter. See, I don't need neither. You can have your dollar back, your gold and your diamonds back. As long as I can live my own life, I guess I'm fine with that. You could keep democracy, scandals, hypocrisy, big business monopolies, free market economies, your 9-to-5 work day, pissy school hallways, game of life arcade, nuclear arms race. See, I don't want the things that's been given by the givers to the villa when all they see is a nigga cast from the throne and turned to drug dealers, murderers and stealers. Like Ben Roethlisberger's appearance. In hindsight, every ward is a war, every ghetto, every hood gets ignored. But what's mine is yours, and what's theirs was ours. What better time than now for us to rise to power? So I will not bow, I will not faint, and I will not fall. I will stand straight, fist in the air just to symbolize the strength. Let our flag rise, it's the start of something great. See, welcome. I ain't seen God, but I damn sure felt him. See, I ain't like my cards, but at least I got dealt something. There's plenty of us out here with nothing trying to get something. And if we don't do it, tell us who is gonna help them. And they ask, am I my brother's keeper? See, I'd rather be his keeper than his reaper. See, I don't kill my own, I kill enemies of our leaders and non-believers. Cause I don't need them neither, ether. So even if you don't care, this was for my people. We on the same path, I'm just changing where it leads to. See, the biggest fear are the things we try and teach you. They don't want you to understand the pyramid and eagle. Because with the power it bestows, behold, the birth of a kingdom. And it's all about control. Control of the masses, control of religion, control of the media, controls your suspicion. Big brother, we wonder who is it? Who's the puppeteer pulling strings from a distance? They got the whole world tripping how they going through it. Tell them quit whining and start a revolution. Thank you, I'm Contra. Peace.
So again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Again, this talk show was brought to you by 1010 Baltimore. We are a company put in place to help change the narrative of Baltimore. Our goal is to inspire our city and uplift our community. We'll be bringing different guests here every Monday starting in February, the first Monday of February, and we'll have conversation. We'll hear from people in the community. We'll hear from experts on certain topics, and we'll like to hear from you. You guys can give us feedback on our social media pages. We're on Facebook at 1010, and that's TEN10 Baltimore. And you can find us on Facebook. You can visit us on our website, which is 1010baltimore.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter as well. And we just want to hear from people in our community. We want to give information to the people in our community. I believe people perish for lack of knowledge, so we want to bring knowledge. We want to bring an artist at the end of every talk show. Contradiction did an excellent job. I feel like a lot of our young people have hurt, pain, and anger sometimes built inside, and they write it down on a pen just to get it out, just to express their frustration. And sometimes we can't sit with a judgmental ear and listen to young people. We really have to hear them with an ear of understanding, an ear of compassion, to know where they're coming from so we know how to reach them. Because again, we're trying to build relationships and build our community at the same time. By ending, I want to ask our two special guests, Dr. Thomas and Mr. William Buie, to come back and give their information on how they can be reached and contacted. If you need a lawyer, if you're looking for a pastor, if you need some kind of pastoral counsel, I want them to come give some information as we close. And thank you all.
Very briefly, Attorney William R. Buie III. My office is at 312 North Charles Street, Suite 201. My phone number is 410-576-7666. If you need any help, just give me a call. Thank you.
Reginald Thomas, I pastor Greater Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church, located on Preston and Luzerne, 2525 East Preston Street. My phone number is 410-675-2440. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, Dr. R. Thomas1, also on Instagram, and we'll look forward to seeing you and speaking with you.
Thank y'all so much.